Thursday, March 10th at 6 p.m. We are in the Bellata Meeting Room at Lunenburg Town Hall, and this is a meeting of the Lunenburg Finance Committee. We are appearing early this evening at 6 p.m. because we've had a couple of scheduling changes. First, our presenter from Monty Tech is unavailable tonight due to an unexpected death in her family. So we will be moving the Monty Tech discussion to March 23rd, which will be a virtual meeting at 7 p.m. And then we have moved this meeting forward to accommodate the town manager and others who would like to attend the APDC hearing, which is scheduled for 7:30 at the Ritter Building. And so with that in mind, we moved tonight's meeting to 6 p.m. and we're hoping that we can get this all done, get the entire agenda hit before 7:30 when the town manager needs to go and represent the town across the street. So with no further ado, actually I'm going to read the preamble here, and then we'll get into it. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. This agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussions to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. I do want to take note that at the meeting this evening, are myself, Mr. Simeone, and Mr. Gray are here in person. Mr. Menard and Mr. Passios are both participating remotely. I did receive a message from Mr. Baelish that he is running late, but he will hopefully be here shortly. I do expect to see Mr. Waters tonight as well. So we should have ins and outs over the course of this evening. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, are there any announcements? Seeing none, is there any public comment from the public? Seeing none, any public comment from the board? Seeing none. Chair's report. I mentioned last week that I was scheduled to appear last night on FATV. I did appear, but the topics were mostly international in nature. It all kind of had to do with Ukraine and not local issues. I made a brief comment about our representation in the legislature, and that was about it. Pretty benign. And then my only other thing that I do want to bring to everybody's attention is that our next several meetings are jam-packed. So we are meeting on the 17th, the 23rd virtually, the 24th live, and then our public hearing is on the 31st. And I'm sure in a moment the town manager will talk about the capital plan. We will need to decide at the conclusion of this meeting if we want to add a specific agenda item to the capital plan around the time of the public hearing. I think that does still warrant some discussion. And that's it for the chair's report. Madam Town Manager.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'll review some of the updates I gave at the Select Board's meeting on Tuesday. On Meadowwoods, I reported a couple of weeks ago that we came to an agreement about the $400,000 down payment on their back taxes, and the agreement was supposed to be $100,000 there every year thereafter until the back taxes were paid off. Well, they paid all their back taxes off last week, so that was an additional $338,341.
So how will that work? Obviously, that's unanticipated revenue at this point. Does that roll over into free cash, or how does?
We'll close out at the end of this fiscal year, and positively affect our free cash
Okay.
balance. So the agreement stays in place, so they would continue to keep on track with their current taxes. So that was good news. Let's see, other financial ones. The Woodruff property, that was, went before conservation. They approved the NOI. That's going to be a funding article at town meeting for the cleanup costs for that. If you recall, a resident brought that up at a prior town meeting, and once we looked into it and we hired an environmental consultant, did a assessment and filed the appropriate NOI with the Conservation Commission.
Do you know what the cost of that is going to be yet?
The article is $100,000. The consultant estimated between 75 and 85, so to give some contingency monies towards that.
Okay.
The 925 Mass Ave, eventual financial impact, positively, we hope, to trying to get that property, the old gas station, back on tax rolls eventually. I'm still working with an environmental consultant that's for the last few years, and now the EPA, and looking, getting funding through the EPA through their targeted brownfields assessment program. So that will be in another follow-up agenda item on the select board's meeting this coming Tuesday.
Do you anticipate they'll have to is there an action expected from that? For the select board?
A decision will have to be made, and we're going to discuss about whether to foreclose on the property.
So
Yeah.
do we need to have possession of the property to
It's,
use those funds?
it would be in the best interest of the town if we did. But we'll go review all that and move forward appropriately. Site access is key. Lunenburg Central project, that building permit payment was received in full last week in the amount of $187,000. So that project is full steam ahead. They hope to have tenants into the building in 2023. And that's on Leominster Shirley Road. That's the 400,000 square foot warehouse building. Other updates I provided to the committee via email, and those are in your dashboard reports. So that includes all the changes, including Monty Tech assessment and the dispatch assessment, as well as the health insurance. And lastly, the capital plan I sent out on Tuesday and made the announcement about the capital plan, a revision to that, to add 3 additional projects and move one of the projects that was on the list to fiscal 24. The project that would be moved to fiscal 24 is the Ritter Building hazardous materials abatement. And our plan is to do the evaluation to see what the full scope of the work for the abatement is and the extent of the cost as well. So we can do the, bless you, we can do the evaluation now in time to have those results for the next phase, next year's capital planning process, fiscal 24. So based on the surplus in the budget, the amount we have available from unexpended capital articles, and what we anticipate for funding articles for town meeting, I've revised the capital recommendation to add an additional $422,800. The breakdown of that is $155,075 from unexpended capital articles and $267,725 from the unappropriated balance from the tax levy. This would include going down the prioritized list that I've provided in my capital plan presentation, of including the generator at the senior center, a ADA compliant outdoor patio space at the senior center, and the AC at the primary school project. So the new total for the capital plan is $2,162,849. Other updates, the select board decided on Tuesday night about the tax title properties that were requested to be removed from the tax title sale auction. And they did concur with the Open Space Committee in removing 4 parcels from that list. Since the initial list was sent out, it went from 50 properties down to 24, and I expect that to go down even further. So people are paying their back taxes. So. And that's all I have, besides the draft annual town meeting warrant. But I'm sure you want to get on to.
Yeah, so in the interest of time, I don't think we're going to go through those warrant items tonight. The only question that I had was the amount on the Fairview Road property, so I'm fine there. I did have one question on the adjustments dashboard. Are we still projecting $1 million in available free cash still?
No, because it would be reduced by the other funding articles on annual town meeting warrant.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
we haven't added those at this point.
Well, that wouldn't be reflected in that because that's not going towards. So that's not calculated into that dashboard. Yes.
Okay.
I haven't added in.
Can we add it, or can we find a way to represent that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the town manager? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
With no further ado, Mr. Oliver. I have your deck. Would you like me to project that?
Yes, please. I have no way of doing so.
Well, then I will do it. Chris, can you keep an eye? I'm going to make you co-host again. And can you just keep an eye on the waiting room?
Yep.
Co-host, yes. And I'm going to share screen. That thing. Share. And to project. Okay, for the people that are on the Zoom, I do not have the participants list up right now, so speak up. Do not raise your hand because I will not call on you. Mr. Oliver, thank you. Welcome to your second to last day of work here in Lunenburg.
Yes.
And looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Okay. Next slide.
All right. Find the right button. Here we go. We got to build. And here we go.
I'm fine. I can see this one. Oh, it's okay. So first slide, just quickly, DPW organizational chart. This is worth seeing because it gives kind of the depth and scope of the department and the departments within the DPW, the amount of positions, and basically what we're comprised of. So you can see we have a sewer department, highway department, a cemetery department, facilities, and a parks and recreation director who manages our rec department. Next slide, please. This next slide is our proposed fiscal year 23 budget, basically line by line. So I'll go through it real quickly. There are no real, last year being my first year, we were looking for a couple of new positions, some seasonal help. We added a facilities position. This year's a little boring. We're completely staffed, so we're not looking for any positions. We're not really seeking anything additional in the budget. For the most part, we're level funded with the exception of salary type line items, but I'll go down through those. So general highway maintenance, we're proposed at $745,500. The town highway garage, which is just office supplies and general office, is $1,040. Highway overtime is $10,512.87. Highway labor, which is going up from fiscal year '22, is $556,920.62. Snow removal has been year to year, $279,849.16. Traffic signs and devices, level funded at $28,253. Vehicle maintenance, also level funded at $73,480. The cemetery department, which includes some salary in there, so this goes up, is $100,115.88. Our tree removal account is same as fiscal year '22 at $29,142.96. Parks and Recreation, which sees a slight increase for salary, is $97,479.44. Public Buildings is level funded from '22 at $235,553.10. And then Facilities and Grounds goes up quite a bit over fiscal year '22 to $649,013. This particular line item it does actually include a new position, which would be a Director of Facilities and Grounds.
Before we move to the next slide, a question that I got from a member of the public recently is, do we have lines that are typically underspent that, just notoriously every year just contribute to free cash? And I note that you have a lot of sort of regular, level funded lines, and I would expect that you're probably moving some of that money over the course of the year. Obviously, snow is its own category, so let's leave that alone for now. But are there lines here that, are traditionally under budget at the end of the year?
So I'll go back to last year. Last year when I got here, there was within the line items, one of the categories was general highway maintenance, and that was $70,000, and it had been, and that was notoriously the account where there was extra. Inevitably, that was needed in other areas at times, so that's typically where that came from. What town manager recommended and what we got approved last year was that got split into two items, which was general highway and engineering. So there was a need for the DPW to work with our consultants, and we didn't really have a line item for that available to the director to kind of be able to use to get some projects done with our consultants. So that was divided. It was split in half evenly to 35 and 35. So this is the first year that's been done. So I can't, we seem to be drawing down the general highway. The engineering may have a surplus, but they're still kind of falling within where that was coming from before. Other than that...
So just to be clear, as you're stating that, and I'm looking at this slide, I see general highway maintenance, but I don't see an engineering. Are these sublines?
Yeah, those are sublines.
Okay.
So, and outside of that, I don't think there's been accounts that notoriously have been overfunded, but it was mostly that seemed to be like, okay, well, we've got a little bit of money there.
Slush fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But Peter, I tend to remember that in the past, we used to have actuals and then a comparison to budget going into at least some of the meetings. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but it seems odd that we don't compare budgets to actuals and trends.
Yeah, I don't have actuals in here. I know, of course, when we look at our budget, we're looking at actuals. I just used my template from last year. I can certainly submit that information. I can get that into town manager.
I'd appreciate
it. I kind of saw it more at the entire town level, actually, than just, DPW in particular.
Yeah.
It's just a general comment.
Right, Chris, we definitely had it at town meeting.
Yeah, and I seem to, do we not do that anymore? So anyways, just consideration.
Yep.
Any questions on this slide?
Nope, let's go.
Okay, next slide, please. Yep. So this is just a general slide, a graphic of how our budget's allocated. I won't go over it completely, but it gives you an idea of where Our main sources of funding lie essentially facilities, general highway, and highway labor being our biggest three. Any questions there? Next slide, please. Again, this slide, approximate cost of services to average homeowner this is actually for fiscal year '22. Just again, a graphic, but it's interesting. The average single-family home value went up in 2022 to $373,000. The average tax bill also went up. I think it was $6,200 the year prior. In '22, it went up to $6,400. And then just providing a breakdown of where the average tax bill is appropriated amongst the town departments. So Public Works checks in at approximately $461 out of the average tax bill.
Does this account for capital?
Nope, just the, well, I don't know if general government includes, I don't think it does.
Okay.
Any questions? Next slide, please. And in this slide, we just looked at that allocation of $461 and applied it to the line items in the DPW budget. Just for general information, the average tax bill is $122 is going towards general highway, about $92 to highway labor, and about $107 to facilities. And again, those are the big three. Any question on that? Next slide. So we're getting into our snow account. So year to date, this year's been a little bit more. Year to date, we are about as of March 7th, we are roughly $419,000, which is about $140,000 over the appropriation of $279. It's been an odd year as far as snow. We've had a lot of ice that we've had to deal with, so a lot of our labor has gone towards dropping salt. It hasn't been a super snowy year, but we've had several storms, and actually, if we want to go to the next slide, this gives a broader account of the snow account. So, as compared to previous years, we haven't been this high since 2018, 2017, 2018. Again, and this doesn't reflect this last storm that unfortunately we just had last night.
Quick question on this
Yep.
slide. Is there a reason why some of the stuff in the right column is red and some of it's black? It looks like it's all deficit.
Yeah, it would all be deficit.
All right, so that should all be red.
Yeah, it should all be red.
Okay. So a question that I posed to you in email, in a Torrid email exchange yesterday, around the snow account, which is, obviously every year what we do is we budget a conservative amount and then we pay that deficit typically at the end of the year with end of year funds.
Yep.
And we are required, just for people, I think everybody in this room understands it, but for people playing along at home, we are required to at least level fund what we appropriate in any given year to the next year. So we will never appropriate less than $279,849 in future years. The question is in a year like this year where, there are funds available, although they're quickly dwindling, would it make sense to not only pay down that deficit, but also appropriate more so that we effectively get ourselves a year ahead on snow removal, and it basically works effectively like a savings account, right? As opposed to scrambling for year-end funds or free cash or whatever to fund that account. And I'm just thinking in terms of, in good years, we should be thinking that way so that in bad years, we don't have our backs against the wall. And so the question really is, are we ever going to go, let's say we were to make that number 350,000, right? The last time we crossed that number, we were lower than that number, was 2016. Would we ever anticipate that we would be below that number? Or I guess 2019 we went to 340. So, is 279 the right number, or should it be a number that is bigger than that number?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, maybe it's a bigger question than the DPW. Obviously, understanding that we can never go back to the lower levels. I guess it's a question of, it's there, you have to plan for it. So we're going to reserve some money because we know we're spending in a deficit any given year on snow. It seems to work. I know town manager does a good job end of year with what we have left. So I don't know if I can answer that. It's kind of above my pay grade. I know it works. I think the biggest danger is if you do, even small amounts, you move it up, you can never go back. So I don't know that anything would ever change that. We'd be back down to that 279. But I guess for me, if it works now, I wouldn't play with it. I don't see any harm in what most towns and communities operate their snow in this manner. Some are probably better at it than others, and I think Lunenburg has been good over the years. So for me, personally, I'd leave it alone. Okay. Although I like round numbers, so I might make it 280.
Is that a local requirement that you can't go below it, or is that state?
State requirement.
Okay, so we can't change it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, suffice to say, though, would you be comfortable? I mean, you put it on another way. The last year we had a relatively low year was, 2019 we were at 340, 2016 we were at 275. The costs have gone up substantially since those years, both in terms of raw materials as well as labor and fuel.
Absolutely.
So, and I don't think, maybe fuel goes down, but the other two probably don't, right? So, in reality, these numbers are not going to go down.
No, and again, is there a reasonable number more than 279 that, wouldn't rock the boat too much? Sure, I'm sure there is. You could, just looking at from 2016 on, 350, 340 is probably in that ballpark. And you're right, cost of salt went up significantly this year. Of course, cost of fuel has gone up. Yeah, and I don't think those things will ever, salt may come back down, but I doubt it. I think we're stuck with that. So, again, that's probably more of a discussion with town manager and town accountant on the intricacies of that.
Fair enough. I don't want to belabor it.
Next slide, again, is just a picture, a graphic of the snow account history, more of what we were just talking about, but of interest is the calendar down below, which is just highlighting events where we were out either plowing or salting or both. Notably, the ones in red are where we had to go out more than once. Guys went home and then had to come back in because of a weather change. So, of course, all of that is mostly overtime in that picture, and that's where a large chunk of that snow account's going. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about the line items. These are the sublines under general highway. For the most part, everything under general highway has been level funded to fiscal year 22, with the exception of the pavement management plan, which, as planned, has been proposed to have an additional $50,000 added to that. So over fiscal year 22, general highways for fiscal year 23 is $745,500. Again, $50,000 more than fiscal year 22. Any questions?
One very quick question. Pavement management line item. Have we been able to expend most of those dollars this past fiscal year, or do you expect when the fiscal year closes that most of those dollars will have been spent? Appropriated for this fiscal year.
Yeah, so we're planning with Keating now our some springtime paving to kind of close out fiscal year 22. I'm waiting for pricing on that, but I'm trying to. I've got 7 streets that we're planning for 22 to close out, and then several more to start fiscal year '23. I can't answer that, Dave, because I don't have the pricing yet on those, but I am trying to spend it because there's still...
Okay, yeah, I only brought that question up because it's a comment made in the past, and it's probably not appropriate going forward, and that was that there aren't enough weeks or months of paving time in the year to spend the amount of money that we had in that line item. But that's just something from the past. I believe with good management, we'll probably use most of that money going forward, especially with the increases if they don't back off next year.
Yep. And to note, coming up, looking forward in the pavement management plan, we also have Leominster Shirley Road. I think we have Lancaster. No, Lancaster was done. I think we have Leominster. So we've got some big projects in there. So coming up, that will use some significant funds.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
So what is the status of the pavement management plan as far as the debt exclusion roads that were the 4-year plan?
I think it's actually in the deck, deeper in, isn't it?
The,
What year are we in? Are we in?
on the debt exclusion, I mean, the pavement management plan was through fiscal year '23, so we're getting into the last year. I think based on the history up to this point, there's been some were taken out of order, so there's a couple that haven't been done. So there's probably a year worth of catching up on that. But for the most part, I know my predecessor had pretty much gone down the list with some exceptions, and there were some that got held up for construction of other projects. Pleasant Street Bridge was one of those. So there will be some catch up, but it should get closed out pretty soon, following this coming year.
Okay. And is that, what's the status of paying that off on the debt exclusion? Are we?
That's a better question for Karen, I guess.
I know that were issued, we've been doing 15-year bonds on those projects, and we did a series of them. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you when everything would be paid, but,
It's actually in the debt service schedule that was in the financial forecast, but we're going to cover that next week.
Okay.
as far as actual dollars available left from the 4 million that was authorized, there's $265,897 left. So the majority of
And that's
that
for
has been spent.
And for FY '23 to finish.
Or even whatever, if anything.
We could, I mean, it's, we have some funds available, so between Chapter 90, the debt exclusion, and pavement management plan, I forget the exact number, I thought I had the worksheet with me, but it's over $1.5 million right now. In fact, it might be, with fiscal year '23 was just announced, which is about what it was last year, Chapter 90 rather.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're almost up to like 1.9. So there's a good amount there.
Good. Thank you.
Any more questions? Next slide.
Look at that.
So this is pavement management funding. This is just out of the budget where we draw funds for paving management. General highway, purchase of service is $26,000. The pavement management plan for fiscal year '23 would be $500,000. The fiscal year '23 Chapter 90, which was just announced, is $419,940, and then there's the remaining balance of the debt exclusion, $263,276. And so there's still money left in Chapter 90 available to us, and that's why we have that amount. Any questions?
Chapter 90 is you got to spend it in that year, though, right?
No.
Oh, you don't? It rolls
It
over?
carries over, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
This next slide, this is a carryover from my predecessor, and I would imagine was part of the pavement management plan. It's just a graphic showing preventative maintenance and routine maintenance.
Oh, we're on the wrong slide. Oh, are we on the right slide?
I think you went by it.
No, that's it. You went ahead.
Oh, I went ahead. I'm sorry. Pavement management benefits. So taking care of our roads, we're providing a safer, more comfortable travel through and around our community. Less time spent on what is only a temporary fix, which has been notable. I mean, we do barely any pothole patching. My guys love it. More effective snow clearing. I don't think anyone would argue that once the roads are cleared in Lunenburg, we're in great shape compared to some surrounding communities. We have contractors who want to work for us because we don't kill their equipment with the roads. But effectiveness of snow clearing, it melts off, it dries up, and we have great looking roads after a storm. Advantages to the proper drainage of stormwater, installing berms where there were none, and creating crowns in the roads. It just helps divert the water better. Instead of running off in a haphazard manner, we can put it where we want it. And then from years past, there's a couple of QR codes there where you can look at the roadway, the original improvement plan, and then the 5-year moratorium policy on new roads. Next slide is the one I started to talk about. The life cycle of a road. It's just a graphic showing the benefit of maintaining our roads. If you keep them in excellent and good shape, you'll get at least 75% of the life over 15 years. After those 15 years, if you don't take care of your roads, road quality drops right off. So you can spend a little now or a lot later. And apparently the pavement management plan, which was put in place, I think has been a success, and I think Lunenburg has great roads. Next slide, please. And it's just getting into the other the line items. So town highway garage basically pays for office supplies and general office expenses, as it's been level funded at $1,040 for some time now. Next slide, which is highway labor. So this includes all the salaries, longevity pay for workers who have been with us for a number of years, as well as on-call and contract evaluation stipends. So we have a few employees who are on call, they get an on-call stipend, and then their contract evaluation, everybody gets a job performance review, and out of that, there's a monetary award. We have both union and SAP salaries under highway. Highway labor does not include the facilities manager or the cemetery superintendent. They fall under their own departments. Next slide, please. Traffic signs and devices. We are providing MUTCD compliant signs. We install new street signs. We replace damaged and stolen signs, which unfortunately stolen signs is a huge issue. You put one up and it disappears. Street line and marking painting, and electrical charges for lighted signs. Just to note, we just, as a request from the fire department, police department, the intersection of Lancaster and Whiting by the gazebo, apparently there's been serious accidents there over the years. There was one a couple of months ago. We just put a new fancy high-tech blinking stop sign. So something new to town. Hopefully it tells everybody there's a stop there.
Is it solar or is it?
Solar powered, yep.
Is that facing Whiting?
It's
on Whiting,
the short-
facing Lancaster?
No, it's on Whiting facing towards Leominster. People
Okay.
apparently don't realize there's a stop sign and they get T-boned on Lancaster.
Okay.
So this hopefully will draw a lot of attention to it. Hopefully not too much. Next slide, please. DPW provides vehicle maintenance for most of the town fleet, all of DPW's vehicle. We work on the public safety vehicles, and we do provide some work on some of the fire department vehicles. Some of it's heavy lifting we can't do, but we do service them. So for fiscal year 22, we're $73,480. That's level funded to fiscal year 23. We have a great mechanic, and he does awesome work. Cemetery department, cemetery care and maintenance, purchase of service and supplies, personal salaries, stipends, clothing allowances. Up until this past year, we had a cemetery superintendent who was in charge of all care and maintenance of all our cemeteries. Last year, the town approved the 2 seasonal workers, which came on board late because of when the budget was approved, and by the time we found them, we happened to find two young people who were motivated and hard workers, and I'm actually hoping they both want to come back for the department. They were a big help, and it was more, for me, more than worth the investment in their salaries. They provided a great service to the town.
So do you post those positions annually?
Yeah. Yep. One of the two young women who worked for us has already said, she told me last year she wanted to come back. She's already been in touch with the superintendent, and she wants to come back. So it's great. She was awesome. And the other gentleman was graduating from college. So I don't know his situation just yet, but he hasn't said he can't come back, but I'd be happy if he did. So for fiscal year '23, there's been an increase due to salaries, up to $100,116.
Has this been reviewed by the cemetery commissioners?
Yes. Yep. Cemetery and parks, both, I sat down with them with their budgets.
Good.
Next slide is tree removal. We generally, most of our tree removal, when we have to call in the big guns, is through a contractor, so it's primarily outsourced. For the most part, it's reactionary. When we need them, we call them. Occasionally, we do see trees that need to be addressed, and we get to them before we just have to react. This provides for public safety, and it's a discretionary service. We use it when we need it. And there's overtime and supplies for some of our staff when they are assisting or they get called out at night for tree service. Again, this account has been level funded for fiscal year '23 at $29,143. Next slide, Parks and Recreation. This includes the parks, the facilities, and recreational programming. Park facilities include Wallace Park, McNally Field, Fitzgerald Field, Marshall Park, Veterans Park, and the town beach. Due to salary increases from fiscal year '22 to fiscal year '23, we're going to $97,479. Otherwise, it's no increase.
We're going to have...
Rob, can I interrupt you for just a second? Within that 97,000, there is a portion of the outsourced services for groundskeeping, not only on, in this line item, it would be parks. Refresh my memory, I think it's in the $24,000 to $26,000 range that's allocated to parks. Do you remember?
I'd have to double check, but that sounds right, Dave.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
So we don't have a parks department staff other than our rec director. So all the mowing of the fields, the groundskeeping is contracted out to a vendor. So the town has a landscape contractor who maintains all the parks, the fields. So the majority of that is the parks. So the Parks Department pays for mowing of Marshall Park, and
So that number is subtracted from that 97,000, or that's money
That's in
coming
the
in
budget.
from another funding source?
it's in this budget.
It's in that 97,000, okay. The programs that are run for like the youth in the summer and that kind of thing, soccer camps or whatever,
Yep.
are those going to be running again this year, and are we
So-
looking to amp that up a little bit?
So
Post-COVID,
our new
knock
rec
on wood?
director, he's motivated, he's ambitious. I've had to actually kind of bring him down. My first year here, it was kind of a mess, and the programs, everything tanked, and everything kind of fell apart around me. So when Mr. Thompson came on board, he has grandiose ideas, and I think that's great in the future. I think we have to build up to it. So I've encouraged him to kind of take baby steps, and I think what we need to do is, we offered all kinds of programs last year with very little interest, and I think what his goal needs to be is generating that interest and then providing what the people want. I know the Parks Department had done surveys and had thought what was being offered would be a success, and we did have a couple of programs which actually were successful, but for the most part, they were all canceled. It was just a mess. So trying not to create that, he's now getting some programming. I'm hoping there's more community type events, a movie at the park, things like that, and so he can then generate the interest, get the families out, and hopefully it's going to take some time, but the program never really got off the ground due to COVID to start with, and so we're just, I think, catching up a little bit now. So I think you have a rec director who I think, given time, will provide the town with some great programs.
Yeah, we've had a lot of disruption over the last couple of years, but I don't think this is something we want to abandon. I think it's something we want to foster and encourage and figure out what success looks like.
Yep, and I think with his experience, I think he'll be good. It's just going to take some time. It's hard for a 19-hour-a-week employee to really, get a ton done. So, again, I'm trying to keep him small, but he has great ideas, and I think he's going to do a good job.
Good.
Rob, where are you dealing with the structural issues at the town beach building?
It's the wall facing the street.
Yeah, I know which wall it is. I'm asking how.
Oh, how are we dealing with it? So
Yeah,
we had
budgetary wise.
well, right now it was slow going and getting estimates. So I had a contractor who looked at it. I needed him to spend some time with the building inspector, look at it, who then was out due to COVID reasons for a number of days. So it's been slow going. I do have an estimate now. It's more than I had hoped. So what I think the next step will be is the job's actually going to have to go out to bid. And then from there, how were we going to fund that? That's right. Depending on how the bids come in, we're going to hopefully use it out of facilities. Again, it's a repair to a facility, so.
So we're not going to need to rebuild the building, suffice to say.
No, and actually, I was fearing the worst upon the building inspector looking at it. He reassured me that it's not as bad as I thought, and he kind of talked me off a ledge, and so.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's not often that things are better than I think. So it was good. It's, all told, it's around a $21,000 project based on the estimate. That's from a local contractor. It wasn't prevailing wage, so it's going to come in higher than that, but it's mostly labor because it's just building a temporary wall, tearing it out, couple of new windows and a door, but rebuild the wall, put back together the siding, some drywall, insulate it, and it's not a complex project. It's just going to take time.
Okay.
And do you see that as be able to be done by the time the beach opens?
With the way the world is in the pace that things go, I'm not super optimistic about it, but I won't give up on it. And I've talked to the assistant town manager about starting to get together some bid documents. So it's moving, but I'm not super hopeful that it will be.
I think from the parks position, we'll probably start talking about what our alternatives are if indeed we can't use the building, or if we can do something to cordon off the area that's either under repair or it needs repair. Basically, all we need that building for the restrooms.
Yeah.
For the most part. So there'll be a workaround one way or another, I would believe.
I'm sure with the advice of the building inspector, if the work's not completed or it's active, to some degree, we should still be able to use the building. We've got a covered porch, which is nice. We can still use that if the building has to be closed for any period of time. But while we may not have the building completely open, I don't think it'll be a total loss for the season in terms of its use.
So it won't cross the capital threshold, and we shouldn't put in a capital if it does?
I missed the part at the beginning of that, Chris.
So if it's around 21 without prevailing wage, I forget, what are we at, like 25 or something for the capital projects threshold? Should we be looking at this as a capital project?
It's a little out of sync at this point, but
Yeah, if you do that, you won't get that done till the fiscal 24.
Yeah, I won't get on that.
yeah.
Just because it's 20.
There are other ways to do it.
Automatically has to go on the capital plan.
Yeah.
The $20,000 threshold is required to be considered as a capital project, but it doesn't mean it has to go on the capital.
Right. There's nothing preventing a department from funding something in excess of the capital threshold.
Out of their own budget.
Right. Yeah. normally, yeah, I'm a big proponent of pushing things through the capital planning and thinking of them holistically, but in this case, I feel like we're out of sync now, and it's gonna be more hassle than it's worth to do. I want this thing fixed,
Yeah,
because
that's the bottom line, is it has to get fixed, and while it's not an emergency repair, it has to get done.
Yeah.
Because the building will only get worse with time.
Okay, let's move on.
So next slide is public buildings. Public building utilities includes all our heating and fuel oil, water, sewer and rubbish charges. For fiscal year '22, we were at $235,553. Again, that's level funded. With the price of fuel, I hope that's
Is there a reason for
prudent.
concern that number's gonna stay there?
Well, unfortunately, my budget was submitted before the latest increases. And I don't recall how this account has been year to year. But that's what's on the table right now. We'll continue on and
They can still be covered though, regardless, right? If it's over that, it can just get pulled from the,
yeah, I would imagine if
Where?
the account goes over because of the cost of fuel, then
We can do it into departmental transfer.
yeah.
there's lots of options.
Yeah, the facilities budget, and that's where I was gonna go with that, is the facilities budget is always a good source, because it's building, so.
Impossible to know for sure.
Yep. Next slide, please. Facilities and grounds, this includes the increase I mentioned of $85,000 for proposed Director of Facilities and Grounds position. This account also includes all the buildings, Town Hall, the Public Safety Complex, the DPW Garage, Eagle House, Ritter Building, the old primary school, the Town Beach, Town Common, Teen Center, the TC Passios Building, and the Brooks House. For fiscal year '22, the account was $564,019. With the $85,000 increase for fiscal year '23, we're looking at $649,000, $649,013.
So, on this one, and this may be a better question for the town manager, but I think now's as good a time as any to address it, is we had talked about this being a separate department head for facilities and grounds. I understand we don't have a facilities and grounds department today, so we need to budget for it someplace. In the future, does this become a standalone department with a standalone budget, or is it still
It's pretty much
part of?
separated out anyways, facilities and grounds. Budgetary-wise, if you look at how budgets put together, the only overlap, even the employees are within that budget. So they are used for snow removal. That would be the only time that there'd be an overlap in the future. Is we would still be called on to do snow removal during those times.
And coincidentally, the snow removal is basically on the facilities and grounds.
I understand, yeah. Okay, and then the other question related to that position that came up at a previous meeting, and it wasn't a fully developed question when it was asked, and I'm not sure that it still is, but when we talk about facilities and public use, there's been an ongoing dialogue between parks and schools and the town, for that matter, when it comes to TC Passios, about scheduling and use of town facilities. Is that in scope or out of scope for this position?
Use of the facilities. So school facilities is obviously separate, that's under the school's purview. Town, for town hall, that goes through town clerk with scheduling meetings.
So I think the answer is no, out of scope.
It's a little bit of, depending on the meeting, as you said, like TC Passios, we don't use for meeting space. We use town hall for meeting space. We use Ritter, the building. For meeting
Yeah, so I'm really talking about community use is what I'm getting to here. And, part of the problem is that as things change, not all of the Ts cross and the Is get dotted when it comes to use policy, scheduling, enforcement, all of those things. And because we have so many different fingers in the pie, so to speak, or so many different authorities when it comes to scheduling and use, it gets very confusing and difficult for community organizations looking to use facilities. So I don't think this is a problem that's going to get solved at tonight's meeting, but because we're adding a new position where this could come into play with public use of town facilities, I think it's important to earmark it or tag it and say, this is something that I think we should be thinking about. Not that we'll solve it completely ever, but a lot of work has been put in by the Parks Department and the School Department in particular around equity and rates and how things get scheduled and all that kind of thing. And I'd like to see us move forward, not backward, when it comes to making sure that the services, in this case, the use of facilities and the interaction between town personnel and organizations continues to get better.
Bigger conversation. I think if you're talking about TCP, there's no dedicated budget for that building. So that, and if you're talking about more and more use of the building, there's obviously related expenses. So
Yeah.
it's a longer, bigger discussion.
Okay.
Not gonna resolve tonight.
No, we won't solve it tonight. And we've got 32 minutes left, so, all right. Next slide.
Next slide. So upcoming facilities projects, just to give a highlight, Town Hall, we've got a project to address the basement windows, sealants, the roof, the chimney. At the Public Safety Building, we've got the chiller replacement coming up, as well as first floor carpet replacement. At the Ritter, we're approaching construction, end of design and construction for the ADA ramp construction outside the building at the front door. And then a bunch of items out of the Vertex report to address mortar and brick repair, paint, existing trim and fascia, sealants and windows, and wood shutters. So those are just some of the things that are in the works that have previously been funded and hopefully getting underway soon. Next slide. This is a list of the fiscal year 23 DPW capital requests, which have all been funded with the exception of the change of the old primary. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's on there. Well, I'll run down them. The engineering design at the Public Safety Building to address drainage at the rear of the building and the mold problem we found out about this year. We need a new 10-wheeler with a plow and sander to replace a 1994 Mack. At the Senior Center, we're looking for HVAC upgrades. Page Street, we are looking for new culvert construction to replace a failing culvert. Additionally, a two-way radio system for our fleet. Town Hall repairs, this is from the Vertex report, year 2 items. A Flat Hill Road drainage design, which is still ongoing. We've been looking at, but we need to finalize and then come up with a construction plan and put out the bid. Marshall Park is a follow-up to the master plan that's ongoing. They'll need a survey of the property line because it's never been done. We don't know where all the property lines are at Marshall Park. We're looking for a utility tractor with a rotary mower. The Senior Center roof replacement, a couple of Vertex report items, which includes the 1998 portion of the building roof. An additional 1-ton dump truck with a plow. At the Brooks House, we're looking for some foundation repairs and basement work to shore that up. And finally, the old primary school, looking to have a hazardous materials abatement done. I didn't go through the cost on those, but the total cost of those were projected at roughly $1.31 million.
Can I make one real quick comment? I'm sure Peter's got a couple of questions, but on CPC item number 4, the Page Street construction, I think during the CPC meetings, a number of times we asked that that be changed to actually say culvert construction, because that always got confused while we were trying to do the prioritization. The study, I believe, was done this year, the engineering, and this item here is the actual repair of that culvert that's failed. I think it's important for the voters to know that that's not just a street, some street work. That's a failed culvert repair.
So noted.
I think that's a very good point.
Yep.
So I got a question still on, I guess it go by number 10 priority because it's both. On the Flat Hill Road drainage design, I've asked, Rob, both you and Heather for some more details on that, and I don't think I've gotten it. The root of that problem really is Cortlandt Circle has a lot of failed catch basins and drainage issues that come onto Flat Hill. And I understand something needs to be done on that because Flat Hill Road becomes Flat Hill River when there's snow melting and large storms. My problem with it is that it's not being really fixed at the source. It's actually now going from one watershed crossing over into another watershed. And then I don't understand the ultimate destination for all this drainage design. Is it just going to then go down Page Street and then people's backyards, which are already flooding? And we also have down at Beaverbrook occasionally flooding of Page Street because of the amount of stormwater that runs into that item. So I'd like more detail on that one. I don't think that one's ready for a design based on the conversations that we've had and the limited emails that I've received on it.
Yeah, so, we tried to take a couple approaches to, as you probably know, Chris, we had tried to work with the owners of a couple of the properties on Flat Hill Road that have brought this to the attention of the town for quite a number of years to try and, put the water where it should be going in the watershed that it should be maintained in. We didn't get that cooperation, so I had to shift gears. Our engineer has looked at it, and essentially what we're looking at is, and what he would be tasked with if we move forward with this is, I understand shifting watersheds and, Page Street may have its own issues. But what we're looking to do and what we'd be looking to design is a system that's going to detain the flow. So not with the goal of not increasing the rate of flow to the system on Page Street. So there's drainage that comes up to the intersection of Flat Hill Road and Page Street. And we're looking to connecting to that. So in order to not essentially swamp that system, you have to detain it somehow, before you get to it. So that's basically where we've left it with the engineer, and he knows that's going to be what he's tasked with when we give him the go-ahead to move forward with it. If there's issues within, and I understand Cortlandt Circle is probably, changed the dynamic in that neighborhood, and that's where the issue comes from. The detention basin that's along Flat Hill Road, which, has been expressed to me that's where, the water comes from that basin, and then in one other spot. As far as issues within that subdivision and their drainage system not functioning correctly, that's new information for me. I hadn't heard that one before. So that could make a difference. The difficult part there is that's a private development that we don't have any control over. If we can document that they're creating an issue that the town is trying to address, it certainly would make more sense to address it at the source. So perhaps, unfortunately, it would have to be my successor, may have to follow up on that. But that's interesting. I haven't heard that before.
So there's those catch ponds, maybe that's not the right term for it, along Flat Hill that used to be, full all the time, especially after, and they're always empty now. So that's one indication of it. It's also the high point in the watershed that should go in. I had talked to some, geo companies about this, is that it actually should drain to the west, not to the east. Then that's where that watershed should naturally drain to. So I'm just concerned that I feel for the two people, and I've talked to both of them, that are affected by this, and it does need to get fixed. I just don't want to push the problem now from the high water mark to the near high water mark down to the lower ends of town, where I've seen culverts that at that last snow melt we had when it was like 60 degrees after the snow, you know, the culverts were completely full and almost over draining across people's, that go under like people's driveways and out through the woods, ultimately end into Beaver Brook there. So I want to be very cautious that we don't cause a problem somewhere else.
And you know, if this puts you at ease at all, I mean, that was always my goal. I don't want to shift someone's problem and create a problem somewhere else. That's not what I want to do. And that's, you know, those were my discussions with our engineer, and you know, if we continue in the direction we're going now, they will have to come up with some creative solutions to prevent that. But I don't have a lot of choices at this point. And you know, as you know, there's nowhere to put the water up there. From my understanding, the detention basin that you're talking about along Flat Hill Road on Cortlandt Circle, you know, was even enlarged years ago to originally when the subdivision was done, to make it bigger. I don't know why you don't see water in it. It has an overflow structure, an outflow structure that should hold some of that water back. So perhaps that's something to look at. It's nothing I'm going to solve tonight. Fortunately, we have an engineer who knows what's going on out there. So moving forward, you know, if there are other avenues to take, he'd certainly be interested in hearing that, because it would make his job easier.
So in the interest of time,
Yep.
this is not going to get solved tonight, and your last day in Lunenburg is tomorrow.
Correct.
So how do we resolve this and get the finance committee to a point where we understand this conversation?
Can I just add?
Sure.
Rob, don't you think that regardless of the final solution for this project, you're still going to need design funding
Right.
for that solution?
Yeah.
So,
This.
and it's not going to end with whoever is the DPW director. It's going to come back before the select board for discussion, because there's been a lot of input from residents on this as well.
So my take on this is, it's a $45,000 appropriation, and if we don't need the $45,000, I'd rather play it safe than not. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm okay with the $45,000 sitting here. Mm-hmm. The problem is that if it's not our problem, it's not our problem. And the Cortlandt Circle Homeowners Association needs to deal with the problem. And if that hasn't been worked out, it needs to before this money is actually spent. And so is that not a potential avenue?
It was looked at a few years ago as far as
Peter, this has been vetted for hours and hours and hours already. I don't think we should be debating this tonight. And you're right, the 45,000 is going to be a start on a plan to solve the problem.
This hasn't been debated at all, Dave. There hasn't been a single debate on this.
Sure there has. You weren't involved with it. It's been going on for 10 years.
I understand it's been going on for 10 years, but where's the debate as to how to fix it? Because I've asked for information on it, and I've never received any.
Well, I don't have a problem with you wanting information, but there's been discussion about the fact that there's been a change in use in the general land in the area that's contributed to the water runoff going from farmland to non-tilled land. There's a myriad of reasons why that water is moving the way it is, and you're not going to settle that issue tonight, and hopefully you get the information that's available.
I'm not suggesting we're going to settle the issue tonight, but you have a committee here of people who pay pretty close attention, and most of what I've heard tonight is new to me. And the finance committee is going to be asked for a recommendation on this capital plan, and I feel like I don't have enough information. So, and with all due respect, Mr. Passios, hearing that people have discussed it in the past is not sufficient for me to say I recommend this capital plan. So we need to figure out how to have this discussion.
The recommendation is for the entire plant dollar amount. It has nothing to do with individual projects. I would just be clear on that.
Oh, I beg to differ. I beg to differ
as well.
If you look at the town bylaw, the number that is voted at town meeting is the total dollar amount. You
But
cannot-
as a member of the Finance Committee, I am fully within my rights to vote against recommending the capital plan if I have an objection to any single item on it, if in my view, that warrants a no vote. So
And just, I want to back up 1 second. I want this issue fixed. I just want it fixed right. And I don't want it fixed $45,000 towards probably another several $100,000 of actual development, only to cause a major problem downstream from this that already is existing today that this might contribute to. And if it is from Cortlandt Circle, and it's because of some failures of their retention bases and drainage issues, because I don't think this was an issue 10 years ago. I think it's becoming more and more of an issue as things are starting to fail and may not be maintained. Then I wanted that to be part of the solution, whether the town pays for that at this point or they pay for it at that point. But I feel like this is a partial solution to a major problem. And I will admit, the Flat Hill Road drainage is a major problem. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I know it's a major problem for the two people that have brought this forward over and over again for many years. Wholeheartedly agree with that. But if this $45,000 should really be $250,000 to once and for all totally fix it, then I'd prefer to have that discussion.
well, this is a design item, so.
Understand, but a $45,000 design, even if you double it, because now I gotta redesign how Page Street, drains water all the way down Page Street to its final destination versus through people's backyard and through under driveways and over other people's yards that have had, 4 to 6 feet of flooding in their basements because of stormwater runoff in the past. We gotta look at this holistically.
All right, I want to curtail this one in the interest of time. I will have a discussion with the town manager shortly, maybe not tomorrow, but by Monday. And we will come up with a course of action for making sure that this is discussed appropriately. Any other items on capital plan? So I have one. I know this will come as a big surprise to Mr. Oliver and the other members of this committee probably. The tractor and mower combo, in my opinion, has not gotten its proper due from a financial analysis standpoint. And Mr. Oliver and I have traded emails this week on the topic. I think we're at an impasse, quite frankly. But in my view, the town spent $170,000 2 years ago on the trackless tractor, which part of the justification for that was that we had an attachment that would fit on that tractor that would do the work that this tractor is now intended to do, which is basically vegetation cleanup on roadsides.
Well, if I can add to that, Peter, the real function of that machine is sidewalk clearing. We had previously purchased a snow blower a few years, I think, before getting the trackless. So at the time, if I were standing here today saying, I need a new trackless to clear the sidewalks, I already have a $30,000 snowblower attachment for it. It's worth noting that
It was half of the argument.
I'm not
for the
arguing.
device.
Yeah,
It was a
and
snow blower.
I'm not arguing
Oh.
that, but if I needed a new snowblower today, I'd be asking for that machine just to clear sidewalks. So I know it was sold that it has other functions.
enough.
And it still does.
Fair enough. And it's also a $170,000 snow blower. So, it is what it is.
Yep.
That being said, Mr. Oliver believes that the attachment, which is no longer functional, we would need to replace the attachment anyway, is insufficient for the job. And last year it was not functioning, and the DPW went out and contracted for a substantial amount of work to be done by a private contractor along Chase Road and several other roads in town. And so the question that I have asked, that I have not received a sufficient answer to in my judgment, is What if we bought the $30,000 attachment for the trackless and did what we could with that $30,000 attachment and contracted out that which we can't? And my understanding is that there are two big differences. Number one is bigger equipment can take a bigger beating, it'll last longer, it won't break as frequently. Number two is it can chop down bigger branches, right? So this thing that we're buying, my understanding is that it can do damage to like a 4-inch branch.
We can do much more with it.
So it's substantially more capable when it comes to clearing substantial amounts of brush.
Correct.
Once you've done it, and once you've gone up and down every street in Lunenburg and cleared the appropriate amount of brush, let's say in a given year or two, you're not going to run into 4-inch branches. You're going to run into scrub brush. And so, in my mind, I can't get past we're going to spend another $170,000. Last week we had a conversation about a $70,000 piece of equipment that's not in inventory. This week we're having a conversation about a $170,000 piece of equipment that's not in inventory that we've lived without in the past. And in my opinion, the financial analysis the financial case might be there. I haven't seen it. And I think if we're going to spend that money, we deserve that analysis.
Fair enough. I guess my point would be is that I have no intention of replacing the $30,000 piece of equipment. It's not suited to the job. And maybe you were sold that it was.
It wasn't, for the record.
Oh, okay. I had a goal when I got here that we rely heavily on contractors and outside vendors. We have the staff to do this work. This is only part of it. The piece of equipment that we have, I think it's 13 years old. It's a problem every single year. It's welded, it's put back together, it's parts replaced, it's out of service as much as it's in service.
This is the mower.
This is the flail mower on the trackless. It's the only thing we can get is the same thing. So going down the road, it's going to be the same problem. It's not fit for the job. It's going to be broken down. It's going to be out of service. If you've seen it operate, it looks like a toy. The hydraulic arms are little skinny things. You could look like you could snap them compared to like a backhoe or an excavator. And it's got a heavy metal drum with metal hammers on it that spins super fast. And it's violent. And it doesn't have the reach. It can't reach up the way we need it. It can't reach out the way we need it. So for me, and I'm a different director than the one before me, it's completely not suited to the job. If I had road shoulders that were just growing with tall grass and weedy material, it would handle it like a champ. But that's not what we have. And I'm not assuming I'm going to be able to do the entire town every year, drive around. Maybe over time we will, but it's going to take time. And in that time, saplings grow quick. So you can do it with a flail mower, but you literally stop, you move it back and forth, you creep up, you do it again. The rotary mower allows me to just drive down the road, just cutting as I go. So I can't even compare the two machines because they're not the same. So, I stand here asking for the money for the piece of equipment that I think we need. The condition of the roadsides from the day I got here was always a concern. People are always calling, my intersection, I can't see. And I have a machine that's sitting there broken down. And I have to send guys out with chainsaws to do the work that should take 5 minutes, takes half a day. So, I know you were looking for additional financial information to compare the two. I just don't think it's a fair comparison. And I honestly have no intention of getting that piece of equipment. So that's why I have not provided it to you.
So
Do you have a comparison of what it would be, to purchase and then staff doing this activity versus outsourcing however much we would outsource on a yearly basis?
yeah, so a straight one for one, Chris. Mr. Oliver did provide me that analysis. The crossover point is a little over 6 years. It's about $45,000 a year to outsource the whole thing.
And what's the life expectancy on this item?
Realistically, 15 to 20 years. The tractor motor, the diesel engine's got 10,000 hours, and actually the same for the mower. I would say the mower comes in slightly less than that because it lives a violent existence too, but based on the amount, I see us using it every summer, in the 10,000 hours, I think I came up with about 28 years worth of use, knowing that the machine realistically only has a 10 to 15 year lifespan.
So the other point that I just want to make, and I don't think that this is really worth belaboring, but this is a tractor that's going to come with a very heavy piece of equipment attached to it. The tractor is effectively a farm tractor. We don't have a lift that's capable of attaching and detaching that arm. So if we wanted to use this thing as a front-end loader to move salt or a backhoe to dig a trench, we don't actually have the capacity to do that on our own.
Nope. It's a dedicated mower.
So we'll have a $170,000 snow blower and a $170,000 mower.
And it's really a brush
And the
mower,
pavement
right?
planer.
Sorry,
The
Dave?
trackless also has another attachment to it, Peter, that you're totally forgetting.
I'm sorry, Dave?
The trackless has another attachment.
Yes, it has a leveling attachment for road work.
We have a sweeper for it as well. I don't think it ever really gets used much, but
And how much has the leveling attachment been used?
we used it half a dozen times this summer. And I think the guys see the use for it now, so it'll get used more. Again, keeping more in-house, we can do more. So it's not a completely useless machine. It does have some other functions.
Again, this is why capital planning is tasked to vet these projects under the charter of this town. It's been working for 20 years, and now all of a sudden the finance committee has decided that it should be more involved than just recommending one way or the other.
It's the first time the finance committee has heard of anything out of the capital planning. So this is our opportunity to recommend to voters if we agree with it or not.
That's fine.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on the capital plan? All right, let's move on. Are we done?
That was my last slide, and unless you have more questions.
Any further questions or comments for Mr. Oliver?
Now, I'd just like to thank Rob for his couple of years of being here, and he's been very approachable all along, and I've appreciated having him here. So good luck, and whoever gets you is a good person.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I fully agree, and despite our disagreements, I fully agree with everything Chris said, as well as what Mr. Alonso offered at the select board a few weeks ago. I think you've done a really good job, and I think we're going to miss you. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure working with the town, and I've learned a lot, and I'll take that with me.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay. I lost my agenda.
Warrant articles.
Warrant updates, we're going to pass over. We have, everybody has in their email a copy of the current flavor of the warrant, and we will discuss that at our next meeting. Warrant level content and timeline. So I put this on the agenda because we need to submit a letter for the warrant in about 3 weeks, a little less than that, actually. And if we're going to stick to the timeline that we've done in the last couple of years, we should have a draft by our next meeting, next week. So I raised this at the last meeting, not as an agenda item, but I put it forth this week. Normally, this is something that is initially drafted by the vice chair, and then the members, it's circulated via email, the members comment on, and ultimately it becomes sort of an acclamation document. My intention this year is to basically follow the same process. It's to be determined who does the draft. But I do expect a read-through If not at the next meeting, at the meeting following, just so that anybody who's following the Finance Committee meetings regularly knows what we're talking about with respect to the warrant letter. And if they think that there's something grotesquely overlooked or something like that, they can comment, and we'll have the opportunity to do so at the public hearing as well. So with that, my purpose is really twofold. Number one is to determine who does the draft. It's not in my plan for the next week, but if Chris had suggested that he might not have the bandwidth to do it, and if he doesn't want to, I will do it. So Chris, are you still in that condition?
Yeah, I'm pretty swamped. I mean, can we tag team it somehow?
Well, I think an initial draft is, I mean, it's hard to do as a tag team, but, you know, I'm happy to share, I'd be happy to outline it, or if you want to outline it and I could draft it, where, you know, I think that's feasible, if not easy. And then the second is, what do we want to communicate in the letter, which I think is probably the most important thing. So at a high level, trying to sort of characterize this at a high level, my thinking, what we want to be able to talk about is the overall financial condition of the town. We'll bring forth, you know, some numbers around total levy, state aid, omnibus budget, capital plan, all those kinds of things that I think are fairly straightforward. But there's also the question around the condition of the town, and how do we see things, both in terms of today, the current condition, but also what we need to be aware of, mindful of, thoughtful of, and maybe even plan for in the future. And if I had to characterize this on my own today, I would say that our financial condition is better than it's been in my memory. We're in very good financial condition comparative to where we've been in the past. But there are some issues looming that I think we need to be aware of and plan for. First and foremost, we're relying on federal money to run what are now some critical services in our school department, and we'll talk about that at next week's meeting. And we have facilities needs and infrastructure needs that we still don't really have a plan to how we're going to pursue it and how we're going to pay for it. And I think that, you know, we need to develop some sort of narrative that would include things, for example, like some of the prices that we've seen for TC Passios or renovations of other buildings and that sort of thing relative to borrowing capacity over the course of the next 10 years. Anyway, those are my thoughts initially. But, you know, this is a committee letter, so I wanted to take a moment to survey you guys to see if you think differently or more importantly, if there are other really important points that I haven't outlined.
So are examples of past letters in the materials for the past town meetings?
Yes, so every warrant, every annual town meeting warrant has a letter from the Finance Committee. Yeah. They're on the website. They might be difficult to find, quite frankly, but we can probably provide those.
I was going to say that would be helpful for me to understand what's been written in the past 2 or 3 years. And I just I'd be happy to help draft it but you know, I don't feel like I have the knowledge to, you know. So if Peter, you or Chris or somebody wanted to just make a bullet point list or whatever, I'm happy to try to shape it into a letter. But I don't feel like I have the background, the knowledge, and all the key points that I could draft it myself, frankly.
Peter, you can actually access previous town reports, not all of them, but many of them, just by Googling them. by year,
Okay.
and
Well, that's
you
good to
can
know.
get access to it.
So as it turns out, just so that everybody knows, not only does that letter go into the warrant, but it also turns into our report for the current calendar year town report. So for example, the town report that's about to be published for 2021 will include our letter from the annual town meeting in May. So they're actually memorialized in two documents.
Do previous ones, someone have a Word version of those?
I'm sure I do in my email someplace, yeah. Any other comments or questions specific to financial condition that we ought to not miss in the draft?
I agree with the facilities. That, to me, is the number one long-term issue of the town. How do we, we have a bunch of needs, a bunch of properties that don't meet those needs and need repair and all that. And I think it looks like, to me, we have committees. I saw the one you and Jeffries was on, Selectman was on the other day. Seems like they're working on it. So I think we have those. The question will be is, what do we get out of that? But I do think that is going to be the biggest concern over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years for us, is how do we handle that? What kind of debt are we going to get into? Are we going to make the debt ceilings and all those things? So I think it's and it's going to.
Would everyone be able to kind of summarize the key things that they'd like to see highlighted this year and send it in an email to just Peter and I, so that we don't get into any kind of open meeting issues, and then we can maybe outline that for, what are you thinking, Peter? It's the next meeting or the meeting after we would have an outline of it?
I think we need a meeting. I think we need an outline circulated by the next meeting. Yeah.
The problem is just like schools is next week, right? And they're like 60% of the budget.
Yeah. I'm not saying we're going to have ample time to discuss it next week, but I think just to keep the thing on track, we don't want to be scrambling at the end of the month. So.
I guess my point on the schools is that they may reveal a lot of material that should
Oh,
be
fair
part of-
enough. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think that, an outline and a very rough draft is as far as we'll get before next week. So.
Okay, and then last year, maybe you just did it on your own, but we actually went into town meeting with another document that kind of summarized you kind of a rush to get this letter out after hearing the budget requests and the final town manager budget. Wonder if there's kind of a two-step approach we should take on that.
Yeah, so last year we did wind up publishing the letter that we came to and agreed to right around the public hearing. I don't recall a second document last year, but my memory has been failing me lately, it seems, so maybe.
The only second document I can think of would have been the letter for special town meeting.
Yeah, we did that for special town meeting, which was specific really to the building issue.
Correct.
The 2 years ago, when COVID hit, we did the whole budget twice to include, we had an early draft of the letter that we redid, but the initial draft never saw the light of day. So anyway, I think that that's a good suggestion, Chris, is if there are no other obvious points other than what I just summarized, we can begin. But if everyone could, put some thought into it over the next couple of days and send myself and Chris an email, my intent is going to be to work on this a little bit over the weekend. So if you could do so, that would be great. Okay, minutes. There are minutes from 3/3 in the folder. I just added them this morning, and I do not want to call a vote on them. We'll do that next week, along with hopefully minutes from this week's meeting. I'd also add that the minutes that we approved last week, I have still not submitted to the town clerk. My reason for doing so was that the links to the documents and the presentations were not there, and they had not been added to the town website last Friday when I went to go to submit them. And I contacted Heather, and I noticed today when I was preparing and printing documents for tonight that they have all since been posted. So I just haven't gone in and updated the links before submitting them. So they will be submitted tomorrow. We're going to hold on the 3-3 meeting minutes, if that's okay with everybody, and we'll tackle both next week. Okay, committee reports. Any committee reports?
Yeah, if I may, Peter, very short one because there haven't been many meetings. Just a reminder to everybody that the Parks Commission has a meeting next Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. WOLA will be there. I initially thought it was going to be one proposal, but according to the poster, they're bringing forth 2 draft proposals again. So I haven't had a chance to pin down exactly what's going to be accomplished that night. But in any case, we will be reviewing Marshall Park again, and then moving forward from there. Again, we have until, I believe it's the first week of May, roughly, to finalize this project with WOLA, and then move forward from there. Green Communities has not met. We are still working towards a filing coming up rather rapidly, so I've got to check with our chair and see where we're at with that and see what additional help might be needed. Dave tends to take on everything, but I know his schedule right now is super busy, so I've got a little bit of time, but not much. I'm hoping to help him out. Capital planning, obviously, we have not met. I don't believe we're going to be meeting again, but that is subject to change going forward to town meeting. And that's it for tonight.
Any other committee reports? So I did go back and watch the school committee meeting from last week, and they did vote to approve a bus contract last week, which was close to their budgeted amount, but was still a pretty substantial increase over previous years. And so if folks have, 10 minutes to find that piece, it's right sort of near the beginning of the meeting with Mr. Cassidy presenting. It might be worth taking a look at and just thinking a little bit about prior to next week's meeting. I will very likely have some questions for the superintendent and Mr. Cassidy on that topic. The Municipal Building Design Committee met on Monday, and the course of work was really to kind of outline a roadmap for how we're going to do this, how we're going to accomplish this monumental task, and the beginnings of a timeline to do it. And the consensus of the committee is that first, we need to do a deep dive into Town Hall and the Ritter buildings, and do a full accounting of all of the recommendations that were made, in particular the Vertex reports, to determine what has and hasn't been done, what should be done for any potential use of these buildings, but then also to look at what are the potential programs that we can put in these buildings over the long term. And there was some discussion about, do we need to consider the timeline, moving people around? What if we tear down TC Passios? Those kinds of scenarios. And what we ultimately came to is, no, we really want to look at what is the best long-term use for these buildings, most practical long-term use, and what needs to be done to bring those buildings to the condition where they can service the needs of those programs. And then once that's done, we can determine what's left that we might need for various construction projects at TC Passios or potentially other properties that we might consider. So that at a very high level, that's sort of the line of thinking right now. We all now have copies of the Type A and Vertex studies, and we'll be meeting, our next meeting is not this coming Monday, but the Monday following. We'll actually be meeting with Mr. McDonald and a couple of other previous members of the Building Reuse Committee, which was the committee that existed before the TC Passios committee, just to get some insights on ideas that may have already been explored, where we ran into dead ends, good ideas that maybe weren't run to ground, so that we have as colorful a picture as we possibly could in terms of how we might program these buildings and where the pitfalls may lie. And that's it for my reports. Does anybody else have a committee report? Okay. Is there any public comment?
Yeah, I got one. It probably should have been an announcement, I guess, but just a reminder that the town caucus is Monday.
Yes.
Yes.
6:30.
6:30 PM at the middle high school auditorium, I believe. Okay. I have one item, and I should have also put it under announcements or my chair's report. I had a conversation, an email conversation earlier this week with the director of the Boys and Girls Club in Lunenburg, who brought to my attention that on April 8th at 7 PM will be their major fundraiser, which is called Are You Smarter Than Our Sixth Graders? Which is formed after a game show that was on TV several years ago, and I'm told is quite a good time. And I was asked if the Finance Committee members would like to participate and form a team for that event. So the makeup of the teams are 3 individuals, a possible 4th, so 3 or 4 people. And basically the commitment is to spend your evening with a lot of screaming middle school kids. And also some adults who are participating and audience members. But I am assured that, and I have not attended personally in the past, but everybody who has attended, who I've talked to, said it's actually a really good time and a fun night. So just throwing this out there, if anybody's interested, it's a relatively short time to commit to this. Like, we need to know, like, within the next day or two. But if you're interested, let me know.
When is it?
It's the 8th, which I believe is a Friday, April 8th. So it's coming up. It's 4 weeks from Friday. So, okay, we got one.
I'd be interested in embarrassing myself.
I'm out of town.
You're out of town. All right.
Yeah, I think I'm out of town too. I'm out of town.
Out of town, out of town. Chris or Dave, any interest?
I would, but my schedule's jumping back and forth right now, so I can't anticipate more than 24 to 48
You can't
hours.
commit?
in advance.
Okay. Chris?
I've done it in the past. It was fun. I fear that I would be called away as well, but I would definitely be an alternate if we had enough.
All right, well, right now we got 3, if you're in. So,
Chris, how about if we are alternates for each other, and if you definitely get called away, I'll find a way where I'm local. I can find some way to, make the availability.
Okay.
all right. Finance Committee's in.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Peter, one quick comment. This is a general comment, just to you, to your committee on the building design, and everybody in the public, as the Vertex report was brought up more and more over the next few months. Just a reminder that the Vertex report was done in a way that brought the buildings in question back to their present or intended original use. So the envelope projects and things like that, they are valid. But as you take a deeper dive in, just be aware that those were based on what was programmed in those buildings, either when they stopped being used or as they were being used at that time.
Very good comment, and I think that we're going to have our work cut out for us, just kind of in, kind of separating that out and figuring out, okay, what is compulsory and what is probable for any program scenario and what is necessary for specific program scenarios. And I think
Exactly.
I think that'll be quite the puzzle to put together. So.
Yeah, and down the road, if you come back to the TC Passios building, there was another complete design done by oh God, I wish I could remember the engineering firm. They're the ones that originally designed that building in 53. And there were numbers attached to that also, and that was a minimal, using the configuration of classrooms rather than reconfiguring the entire building. That's just one other data set that is available.
My next door neighbor, Drew Benally, told me an interesting story the other day that that building was actually designed in the early 40s and kind of put on a shelf during World War II, and then resurrected after World War II, and they went and built the building in the early 50s. But part of the discussion around the age of that building is that, a lot of the early design work was done well before the building was built, which I had no idea, but, it's part of talking with people in town who've been around for a while and, have some history, so.
Yeah, Peter, that's a new one to me too, because
Yeah.
one of the things about that building when it opened was it was state-of-the-art in regards to egress from the building in case of fire.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard that story.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we've got quite an agenda for the next several weeks. I think based on the conversations tonight, capital plan is going to find its way back into our discussions over the next couple of weeks. As I said, I will have a conversation with the town manager about how we address or talk about and possibly expand the conversation around the Flat Hill Road issue. And if there's anything pertinent, I'll advise via email this week, but suffice to say, we got our work cut out for us over the next 3 or 4 weeks, so. And just as a reminder, please send comments to myself and Chris for the letter, and we'll put in some hours over the weekend to try to get something for you to read early next week. With that, any alibis before I call for adjournment? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Evan,
Second,
second by Dave. Roll call vote, Mr. Passios,
aye.
Mr. Menard,
Aye.
Mr. Balish,
Aye.
Mr. Gray, Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mr. Simeoni,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. We are adjourned.